You're moving fast but going nowhere, winning applause but losing yourself. You smile in public, collapse in silence. Every step feels like noise, every goal feels hollow, and still. You keep playing a game you don't understand, with rules you didn't write, chasing crowns that mean nothing if your soul is starving. You're already on the board, but you've forgotten who placed you there. Life isn't a casual chess game, it's a silent initiation. You're not playing on polished marble under warm lights. You're deep in the shadows where every move echoes through your unconscious. And the pieces. Symbols of fears you never faced. Decisions come not from wisdom, but from wounds disguised as logic. And the deepest tragedy, you still don't know your role, not the pawn, not the queen, not even the spectator. You're the king. But the king, unaware of his own essence, becomes the most fragile piece. You've been moving to be seen, not to be safe. Rushing forward like speed equals strength. But the king doesn't race, he reigns. His power isn't in movement, it's in presence. Yet every day, you wake up trying to earn a crown that already rests within. Trying to impress pawns while abandoning your throne. You confuse noise with strategy, applause with clarity. And each move you make for approval steals a piece of your soul. What are you truly defending? Your essence or just your image? No one taught you that the real battle isn't on the outside. The game happens in silence, inside the castle you never built. You thought protecting your name was enough, your title, your reputation. But those are shadows on the wall. They disappear with the light. What truly holds the kingdom is unseen. Mental clarity, emotional balance, unwavering purpose. That is your real fortress. And without it, every applause becomes hollow. Every victory becomes noise that drowns your inner call. You've been trying to command the board without commanding yourself. That's why the pieces fall, even when you seem to be winning. Because you can't protect the essential when you've never looked at it. You defend roles instead of roots, goals instead of grounding. The real game begins when you stop performing and start remembering. And the only way to remember is to sit in the silence you keep running from. There, where no one claps, no one watches, your true strategy is born. Real power doesn't shout, it watches. It knows when not to move. It knows that sometimes silence is stronger than force. And still, you fill your calendar, flood your mind, flood your feed, just to not feel. But the king doesn't panic in the dark. He studies it. He walks slowly because he walks with certainty. You can't fake that presence. You either have it or you build it. And that building begins when you decide to protect peace before pleasing people. And what happens every time you betray yourself to belong? You place the king in check and call it ambition. You move without direction and call it progress. You call anxiety drive and burnout dedication. But inside, your inner kingdom crumbles. You sacrifice clarity for validation. You abandon what's essential to defend what's temporary. And then you wonder why you feel so empty, even while surrounded by wins. Because nothing external can compensate for the fall of your center. Do you know what makes a kingdom unshakable? It's not gold. It's not castles. It's not legions. It's the silence within the king. When that silence is broken, chaos rushes in. You've let too many voices shape your direction. Family, society, ego. And none of them asked what truly matters to you. When was the last time you sat down and asked yourself with brutal honesty, what am I willing to lose? And what must remain sacred no matter what? Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But how can you become if you're always pretending? How can you lead if you've never listened to your own voice? You've memorized the rules of the board, but forgot to meet the king within. And that's where everything must begin again. Because if the king collapses, it doesn't matter how many pawns you have, the game ends and your soul knows it. there's a part of you that already knows what must be protected. It whispers in the silence between distractions. It appears when your mind quiets and your masks drop. That part doesn't want more. It wants truth. It wants stillness. And it's tired of pretending to be unbreakable when what it really needs is to be whole. But wholeness doesn't come from achieving. It comes from aligning. And alignment starts when your outer moves serve your inner voice, not the crowd's applause. You've confused strategy with noise for too long, but real clarity doesn't rush. It listens. And when the noise quiets, the truth speaks. It says, you don't need to conquer everything, only protect what's sacred. But you've been giving that away, your peace, your values, your sleep, for a spotlight that burns out faster than it warms. It's time to turn inward. Not to retreat, but to remember. Because memory isn't just recollection, it's reconnection with what you never lost, only ignored. Power without purpose will always lead to collapse. And you've felt it, that strange emptiness after a win, that silence after the applause. Because no matter how much you move, if the core remains forgotten, the board means nothing. This is the trap, appearing strong while crumbling inside. People admire your mask, but your soul knows better. The king doesn't need admiration. He needs grounding. He needs to know what he'll never sacrifice, not for love, not for legacy, not for anything. That's why today must become sacred, not because the outside changed, but because you choose to shift the inside. You're not too late, you're not too lost. You're simply distracted by what doesn't matter. And when the distractions fall, the direction rises. It's been there all along, covered by expectations, disguised as ambition. But now the fog clears, and what you see isn't more to do, it's less to lose, because what's essential doesn't multiply, it deepens. If you've read this far and felt the pull, then this is your moment. This isn't coincidence. This is your unconscious speaking through the silence. So pause, let it echo, and if it resonates, write in the comments, I'm returning to my center. Writing it down is not symbolic, it's an act of creation. It's the first manifestation of desire. It's how the invisible begins to shape the visible. It's how inner truth becomes outer movement. That's not poetry. That's the psychology of awakening. The moment you protect what truly matters, you no longer chase. You choose. You no longer rush. You observe. And that shift, small, invisible, changes everything. Because the world bends not to those who run, but to those who remember. And you've remembered, not the rules, the essence. And the essence doesn't scream. It doesn't beg. It stands still while others collapse from motion. It's the stillness of the king who knows the game is never out there. You've been taught that leadership means commanding others, but the true path begins by leading your mind. The battlefield isn't filled with enemies. It's filled with your own projections. Voices that say you're not ready. Patterns that replay defeat. Traumas that disguise themselves as personality. But these are not you. They're echoes of moments you survived. And if you survived them, they no longer define you. They only linger because you haven't turned to face them with presence. Presence is the most underestimated force. It doesn't need explanation. It doesn't argue. It simply is. And in a world addicted to reaction, your presence becomes a threat. Because presence cannot be controlled. It cannot be manipulated. It doesn't bend to approval. It exists from a place beyond performance. That's why most avoid it. It reveals what they've buried. But you are here to embody it, to carry it like a sword that cuts through illusion. There is no power in pretending. There's only exhaustion. Every time you suppress truth for acceptance, something sacred dies. Not loudly, quietly, in the background of a crowded schedule. But the soul keeps score, and no amount of recognition will soothe the parts of you that feel unseen by yourself. So stop negotiating with your intuition. Stop delaying what you know. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the refusal to betray what's real. You've been living on borrowed definitions. Success, worth, strength, all shaped by voices that never asked what you truly value. But now is the time to redefine, not with words, but with decisions. The decision to protect your emotional sovereignty. The decision to choose clarity over chaos. The decision to pause, not because you're weak, but because your next move deserves intention. This is leadership from the inside out, the kind that cannot be bought, copied, or broken. And here's what society will never tell you. The one who sees clearly is always harder to manipulate. The one who knows their worth no longer begs to belong. That's why most systems fear awareness. Awareness dismantles control. It breaks the illusion of success as performance. It dissolves the addiction to external validation. And it frees you to live on your terms. Not louder, not faster, just truer. And in a world addicted to illusion, truth is the most dangerous light. Clarity doesn't come with noise. It arrives in silence, sometimes disguised as discomfort, because when everything quiets, there's nowhere left to hide. You meet the version of yourself that's been waiting to be seen. The one that isn't performing, selling, or proving, just breathing, just being. And in that meeting, you realize you don't need to become anyone else. You need to return. Return to the inner temple where your values were born. That's where direction begins. Not in the future, but in the memory of your truth. And once you return, you stop sacrificing the essential for the urgent. You stop mistaking motion for evolution. You start choosing with precision. That's when your life stops looking full but starts feeling aligned. That's when peace becomes more important than applause. And the game? It becomes sacred again. Not because you've mastered it, but because you now play it from the center, from within, from the seat of the king that no longer doubts its right to rule. You can lose titles, achievements, followers, and still remain intact. But if you lose yourself, everything else collapses. That's why the most dangerous enemy isn't the opponent on the other side. It's the distraction that lives inside, the thought you didn't question, the fear you normalized, the urgency you never challenged. Those subtle movements that steal your clarity until you wake up and realize the war was never outside. The checkmate was always within. Self-knowledge isn't a luxury, it's survival, it's strategy. It's the invisible armor that shields you from collapsing every time life shifts. Because clarity doesn't stop the storm, it anchors you through it, and the world will try to convince you otherwise. It will glorify chaos, it will reward distraction, but your soul knows better. It craves peace, not silence but peace, the kind that comes when your actions align with your values. That's the essence of spiritual strength. You've been told that strength is about power over others, but the ancients knew real power is mastery over self. Egypt didn't raise kings by force. It raised them through rituals of memory and alignment. The throne was earned by those who knew how to protect the sacred, first inside, then outside. Jung called this individuation. The Egyptians called it Mat, the harmony of soul, truth, and purpose. And that harmony begins when you no longer outsource your worth. Most live as pawns, not because they lack strength, but because they've never stopped to ask, whose game am I playing? They move out of fear, react out of guilt, build without meaning, and then wonder why everything feels hollow. But pawns don't become kings by crossing the board. They become kings by remembering they were never pawns to begin with. That shift changes the entire game, because now every move becomes conscious, every step sacred. You don't need to fix everything today. You don't need to rush toward clarity. You just need to stop betraying yourself. Every little decision made in alignment is already a revolution, a quiet rebellion against noise. And that's the power they never taught you in school. The power to say, this matters to me, and that doesn't. The power to say no without guilt, to walk slower but deeper. That's how the board begins to shift, when your moves carry truth. The greatest illusion is believing the goal is control, but control is exhausting. What you need is connection to your breath, to your truth, to your unshakable core. That's the only place no one can invade. That's the only throne they can't steal. And once you sit there, everything else becomes optional. Not irrelevant, but secondary. Because when you know what's essential, everything else finds its place. And nothing can move you without your permission. Let this be the reminder. You are not the noise. You are the stillness beneath it. You are not the opinions. You are the clarity that observes them. You are not the role. You are the presence that plays it, but never becomes it. And from that place you lead. From that place you protect. Not by building walls, but by choosing with intention. And every intention shapes reality. Every intention reclaims the throne. And now you remember. The world teaches you to conquer, but it never teaches you to protect what truly matters. That's why so many win the game and still feel like they've lost. They chased everything, except themselves. And now they sit on empires built on emptiness. Don't follow that path. Choose another. The path where presence is wealth, where peace is the real trophy, where silence is not absence but alignment. This path is quieter, but it leads you back to yourself. You won't need to shout anymore. Your clarity will speak for you. You won't need to explain yourself endlessly. Your presence will become explanation. And slowly, the noise around you will lose its grip. Because nothing echoes louder than someone who knows their direction. That's the kind of strength the world can't monetize, the kind it fears, because it cannot be bought, manipulated, or broken. It simply is, solid, rooted, sovereign. So the next time fear knocks, ask it a better question. What part of me haven't I defended? That fear is not weakness. It's the alarm that tells you where the cracks are. And if you listen, not react, but really listen, you'll find not something to avoid, but something to integrate. Your wounds are not obstacles, they're blueprints, and only those who study their own pain can rise above it with wisdom. That's how the king becomes untouchable, not by avoiding the storm, but by learning to move through it without losing center. Look at your life now, not with judgment, with truth. Where are you still playing to survive instead of choosing to lead? Where have you exchanged your essence for safety? And more importantly, are you willing to reclaim what was once sacred to you? Because the throne has always been there, covered by dust, silence, and hesitation. But it never left. It waited. And maybe today is the day you finally sit in it again, not to rule others, but to protect what anchors your soul. This is not about perfection. It's about remembrance. It's about making peace with your pace, understanding that your timing doesn't need to impress, just align. Some build empires fast and hollow. Others build temples slowly and eternally. Choose the second, because your soul was not designed for speed. It was designed for depth. And everything that truly matters takes root in silence before it ever grows in the world. Protect your rhythm. Honor your breath. Return to your inner kingdom every day, even if only for a moment, because when you nurture the center, the edges stop bleeding. When you protect the core, the chaos becomes background noise, and when you remember what cannot be negotiated, your life starts moving in a sacred geometry. Not just forward, but inward, deeper, stronger, clearer. And if one thought should stay with you after all this, let it be this: you are the king, not because of dominance, but because everything depends on your center staying intact. When that center holds, nothing outside can break you. When it falls, nothing outside can save you. So protect it, even quietly, especially quietly. That's not weakness, that's divine strategy. So no more apologies for choosing silence, no more shame for choosing peace. No more pretending to be unbreakable, just be unshakable. Not because you resist emotion, but because you feel it fully without losing your direction. And from there, you lead, with presence, with purpose, with power that doesn't scream. It simply stands, radiates, commands without force. You've arrived at the gate. And now you know, the real game was never about checkmate. It was about remembering what you refused to sacrifice. That's your crown. That's your freedom. And from this moment forward, every step you take with that knowing becomes a victory. Silent, sacred, yours. The board hasn't changed, but now you play from within. So go, not in haste, but in truth. And before you do, don't forget, this awakening is not the end, it's the threshold. A beginning lived from the center, not the noise. And if anything here echoed inside you like a voice you almost forgot, subscribe and stay close. Because from now on, every move must come from who you are, not who the world told you to be. We'll meet again, maybe in the next video, or maybe in the sacred silence between one move and another.